Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. As we all know, the nation is once again in a state of suspended angst, and some would say mourning, following this week's abduction of more than 400 persons in Kaduna and Borno states by faceless bandits. Just like in 2014, when Boko Haram kidnapped 278 school children from a secondary school in Chibok. There is outrage. Critically, the level of shock and public consternation over this recent incident has not been pronounced. Why? To explore this further, we are now being joined by Danjuma Mohammed, a public affairs analyst and vice chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. It's good to have you here, Mr. Danjuma.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Welcome to the show. Now, we have just been talking earlier today about the incidents in both Kaduna and the incident in Borno. Do you think that the government is doing enough to keep people safe, particularly the IDPs in the resettlement areas and children in schools?
Yes, exactly. First, let me start by acknowledging the fact that federal government, particularly this administration, has been up and doing since its inception in May last year. And talking about the Kaduna and Borno abduction of school children, in the first place, it ought not to have happened. Secondly, it happened because we must admit that the criminals succeed in taking advantage of the ungoverned spaces. That is the issue. And getting them back, federal government has been up and doing in ensuring that it doesn't continue. And it has been up and doing also in ensuring that the children are back safely. But you see, there are bottlenecks, which we must be frank to ourselves. The subnationals, talking about the state governments, do have arrangements, using security arrangements, using local vigilantes and all that. Well, ordinarily, it is good, if only it is complementary, to the federal government arrangement in terms of national security arrangement. But unfortunately, what we see here is that these things present bottlenecks. You have bottlenecks in symbiotic relationship. It's not symbiotically coordinated. And that has been the major reason why the children abducted in school children abducted in Kaduna and Borno are not back up till this point. But the last time I checked, I think federal government is almost gaining, inroad into getting the children back. But the truth of the matter is that nothing like that has happened since after then, under this administration particularly. And you will agree with me that if not for the interruptions we had during December, particularly in the coordinated attack, what seems like a coordinated attack in Abuja, I mean, it's been quite impressive. I mean, security situation-wise in Nigeria. And secondly, also, you will equally agree with me that since after then, that the federal government, the national security agencies went into action, Abuja and Nigeria has been very, very peaceful. Don't forget that the General Chris Musa, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, just reported that in February alone, 974 terrorists, bandits, or kidnappers were physically eliminated. So they are up and doing. Nigeria is not doing badly presently, security-wise. The federal government must be commended for this.
All right, Mr. Mohammed, I hear you loud and clear that Nigerian security apparatus and the Nigerian government are not doing too badly. But given that this is almost exactly 10 years after the Chibok girls were abducted, this is happening again. Leah Sharibu is still out there and nobody knows what has happened to her. Will you be confident to say that, yes, there might be times when things look peaceful, but then when all of a sudden you have this mass abductions, vulnerable people, pupils, students, are you confident that we are really doing well? That's one. And secondly, the president has charged the security agencies to go after the perpetrators. But we have the Kaduna state government reportedly in cahoots with negotiators on how to return the kidnapped or the abducted pupils. is this not at variance with what the president is saying? If on the one hand, the commander-in-chief is saying, go after the perpetrators, rescue the abductees, but then you have the Kaduna state government being reportedly, trying to negotiate. If you negotiate, won't you pay ransom? If you pay ransom, are you not setting the ground for another round of abductions? Because he's going to pay those who are perpetrating this dastardly act.
Yes, you see, your question just, particularly your second question, just corroborated what I said earlier. For me, I don't take it as a question, I just take it as a landing pad for me. What happened is, what the president directive is the ideal and more professional approach to the issue. Now, what you have from the state government or state governor is just what ordinarily, ought to have been a complementary, action, but unfortunately, it's not really, is miscarried. Miscarried in the sense that it is not complementary of the operations of the national security agencies. And what I've just said here is that, first, the mass abductions simply were made possible because there were a lot of ungoverned spaces left abandoned by these same governors and their local government chairmen. That is one. Secondly, getting them back becomes a problem because when the national security agencies acting under the president decides to approach the issue professionally and with decorum, you see, you have these infiltration, I would say, from the subnational heads, from the state governors. Now, state governors, as you know, are constitutionally, security officers of their respective states. But unfortunately, they do not have the orientation, to a kind of operate, security, actions and activities. That is why you have these, variant directives. So, and that is what has constituted the bottleneck in getting the children back. It's just it. Otherwise, left for the president and the national security agencies that are doing very well, I can assure you right now, honestly speaking, it will have been since, resolved, and the children will have been back to their respective schools and homes.
So let's
But the challenge before us as a nation is to resolve this issue where you have a president that is at the head, the ultimate head of national security apparatus, and having a subnational head somewhere whom also you have domiciled some level of authority to him, being number one security officer of his state. So what should happen here is, being number one security officer of your state should not give you, the latitude, the powers to act in variance with the federal authorities. Rather, you should work symbiotically. Whatever they are doing at state level should be coordinated by the national security agencies who have the professional training, the professional experience, professional capability, and even the orientation to handle things like this. I mean, look at what happens. Take Kaduna State in the Northwest. I mean, it's been the problem with banditry in the Northwest. Kaduna State, Katsina State, and Zamfara State. They all have these arrangements of local security, vigilantes being converted as what used to have as a civilian JTF in Borno. For civilian JTF in Borno had a lot of military, input in their making, in their training, in their orientation. These other ones don't have. So what we have in essence is, instead of following the culprits and making sure they nip this banditry and kidnapping in the bud, they simply use the arms, entrusted to them, for vendetta and witch hunting and doing all sorts of things, which really creates more serious implication and damages to national security. So the problem is simple, that there is no symbiotic coordination between the national security agencies who are doing their work with the local arrangements by the state governments. And that is it. Once that arrangement is completely perfected, I'm telling you, all these will be history, because the criminals simply are taking advantage of the space, the large ungoverned spaces, around this country.
Okay, let's further dissect, the role of, the collapse of the local government administration as it plays in the security challenges that are being faced by the communities. And I ask this because, experts have long linked the collapse of council administration to the state and the local government joint account system, which enables the state governors to capture these resources, but still end up giving the local government peanuts. The resultant effects of this being low economic activities and zero infrastructure at the grassroots level, which still leads back to this mass poverty and by implication, the rise of crimes and kidnapping in this situation. So isn't that something that focus should be on? Like you've just said, there's a mass land that is being ungoverned in certain areas. So how do we fix this problem?
Exactly. Yes, and that is where we are now. We are at the point where we have to focus on what should be focused on. What should be focused on, like you rightly mentioned, is simply how to ensure that these tiers of government actually function as envisaged by the Constitution. So it's a constitutional thing. So now we're talking about legislation. It's not a presidential or executive issue. It's now a constitutional thing. So we have to face the National Assembly. It is our duty as citizens, and it's equally our opportunity as a nation to solve this problem once and for all, because it has generated all the hula baloo that we have today as security problems, as economic and poverty issues. The truth of the matter is that state governors must be allowed to must be made to allow local governments to function. You see, we inherited a constitution from the military, and it's a pity. The framers of our constitution really did not envisage the fact that people will come one day and become state governors and even ambitiously, wield powers that are even beyond the powers of a president. I say this because Nigeria's president cannot determine who becomes state governor anywhere. Nigeria's president cannot determine who becomes even National Assembly president, chairman or a Senate president or member Speaker, House of Reps. But the state governors, by virtue of the manipulations that is being done around the Constitution, the state governors determines who becomes local government chairman, who becomes the councillors, who becomes a state speaker, a state assembly, who becomes even members of the state assembly. And it's not right. And that is where we are at this point. It cannot allow the federation as it is today to work and to function properly. So in the first place, the military that handed over the constitution to us, we are not really looking at the possibility of this happening, because under the military, in fact, the president, the military head of state, determines what the state gets under the military. But in this case, it is not so. And we went further. That is even the irony. We went further ourselves to even insert some unfortunate powers in the hands of the state governors, making sure that you create a state independent electoral commission. They don't function. They simply, if the elections at local government level should be handled by the Independent National Electoral Commission, I'm telling you, it will be whatever you have today as charried, which they call local government election, will not have existed. And you have, independent-minded Nigerians going back to their local governments to contest election and winning, and making sure that local government functions, where they can deliver developments. But unfortunately, we put that also under the paraphernalia of the state governor. So it's a legislative thing. What we need to do is to confront the National Assembly. I use the word confront because I'm too passionate to have this resolved. Because until this is resolved, it's either we do one or two things. It's either we allow you reduce the powers of the governors, or reduce the influence or negative tendencies of the governors on the local government, or you simply allow the federal government to take at least 95%, if possible, of the national allocation accruals from FARC. That way, at least federal government can deal with these issues successfully. And also we cannot justifiably hold Mr. President to whatever that is happening in those areas. But if we don't get this done, I mean, then we have a problem. But certainly the focus here shouldn't be either the president, who has little powers constitutionally over the governors or the local government council. Rather, we can only hold the president accountable within his own radius of operations as granted by the Constitution. But the truth of the matter is it's a legislation issue. We have to face the National Assembly and resolve it once and for all so that local governments can be independent, not only economically, but also politically, by ensuring that local government elections are uplifted. Let it be handled by the same body that handles the presidential election. Then there you can really monitor what we call independence, not the charity you have to there seek.
Thank you, sir. So you've spoken about, the local government, and we had cases in the Bama local government in Borno State where people were killed earlier this week, and we also had, and the kidnapping was in a different local government area. So obviously the structures at the local level are quite weak. But I would like us to focus more so on the fact that IDPs are currently being displaced. These are people who have internally displaced people who have essentially been made refugees in their own country, and now they're facing insecurity. The situation in Borno State was IDPs who were kidnapped this week, and the governor of Borno, Zulum, has come out and he's spoken about the economic situation that they're facing and how there are fears that some people who were given amnesty previously will now return to Boko Haram and return to insurgency. Do you think this is something that we should be worried about in Nigeria, and do you think this is something the government needs to tackle?
Yes, you see, the truth of the matter is that Borno State, as far as the national security issue is concerned, should be seen as a very special case. You agree with me that at least in the last 20 years, no state in Nigeria has seen massive military operations like Borno State. And also the fact that, you still have pockets of attacks here and there. Well, unfortunately, it shouldn't be. But, judging from our own level of development and our inadequacies, as a nation, these things are not things that can be resolved overnight. It takes time to resolve them. You see, when the governor talked about a kind of giving them a reorientation and admitting them back to the society, it is possible, it's doable. All you need is to have a well-coordinated program for this. I mean, you cannot say because somebody was once a member of the Boko Haram, and look at even the Geneva conditions for surrender does not even allow you to even shoot a soldier who have surrendered in the first place. What do you do to such a soldier? I mean, you reorientate him, and of course, you reintegrate him to the society. It is not bad, but it must be done within a well-coordinated, framework of, orientation process, a process that cannot be faulted, a process that can actually de-radicalize the mind of these criminals. And like you rightly mentioned, we still have to do something economically, do more than what we are doing, particularly at local government and at state level. Do what we are doing economically to get the people, have a feel of being part of the country. They don't even have a feel of being part of the country because they are so far away from developments. And money, that is the irony. Money is being allocated for these same people, for their development, for their health, for their education. But because we allow all these bottlenecks and, this thing we call, governors' oppression on local government, it doesn't get to them. So, I mean, there is this balance that says a hungry man is an angry man. What do you expect from there? So, you see, these problems are mostly being created because we, particularly the elites, allow these things to happen. The governors, Nigeria's president is even more answerable to Nigerians than the governors. The governors are not answerable to their people. Take, for instance, Mr. President, before and even immediately after he embarked on some of this reform, envisaged the fact that there will be need for intervention, particularly at palliative level. What did he do? He earmarked 5 billion naira gave out 2 billion naira, gave out 5 trailer loads of rice. But people still ask the president, what are you doing? Where is this? Where is that? Nobody can tell you that he saw his state governor sharing rice to Nigerians at grassroots level, and yet we are quiet. Isn't it ridiculous?
All right, Mr. Mohammed, just very quickly before we let you go, what will be your thoughts about the call by the wife of the president, Mrs. Remi Tinubu, asking governors and lawmakers to consider making kidnapping a capital punishment? What will be your thoughts on that call?
It's a perfect and a welcome call. It is a perfect and a welcome call, because kidnapping, as far as I'm concerned, is dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing. I mean, there are situations that are worse than death. I do not pray that anybody finds himself in such situation. Sometimes it is better that death carries you peacefully in your house than to become a victim of a kidnapper. You are subjected to all sorts of torture, particularly the woman. I mean, I'm a very emotional person. I would not want to go further, not to break in tears. I mean, for what they do to females. But I can assure you that was the best thing to do. Do it. The National Assembly must be up and doing, because that is one other area that is not making our federation to work properly. They must be up and doing. Nobody is asking them to be a rubber stamp to any other branch of government. But unfortunately, what we are seeing is that national assemblies are even being controlled more by the state governors. And that is why they are afraid to ensure that they legislate laws that will grant local government a complete autonomy and functionability. But the call by the First Lady is apt and should be implemented. Thank you.